part 2 of the video. So by now you should have a definition for positive negative space and two very simple drawings. Again, even stick figures is fine for examples of positive and negative space. Basically, if you draw anything, it's positive and negative space. So we're going to talk about what symmetry is, asymmetry, and draw some examples of asymmetry and symmetry. Okay, so symmetry. Let's get started with that first because so much fun. All right, let me hit present and get to it. Okay, so we already know what positive and negative space is. So symmetry. Symmetry simply states a mirror image, same on both sides. And you already know this. If I show you some examples, you have seen symmetrical. It's everywhere, right? This is all around us. So of course, here's an example of a bug where if you divide it in the middle, there's an axis. It's the same thing on both sides for the most part. Asymmetry, you can probably guess, not the same on both sides. So if you're going to write down definition for symmetry, you could just say same on both sides. Asymmetry, not the same on both sides. And here's some examples of asymmetry where no matter how I divide these drawings, I am not getting the same thing on both sides. All right, that is asymmetry in a nutshell. Here's another example of asymmetry. So grasshopper on the side view, clearly asymmetrical. So it's how you're looking at it, right? So if I can't divide this anyway and get the same thing on both sides. So write those definitions down. I'd love to show this as an example too. This is a photographer took some pictures of people's faces and then check this out. You can say this is a symmetrical image, right? Because it's the same thing on both sides. But what's interesting is that if you actually divide a human face in half and then cut it. So what the photographer did is took this half and made the same human face. Look at that on both sides. Crazy, right? Doesn't look like the guy at all anymore. And then it's interesting, they did the same thing for this side over here. I was curious, and they got that. And I don't know why. This guy looks more like him than this. It's just weird, right? But that's something you can do. And we might play around with that a little bit later in Photoshop. Crazy stuff. This is also a great video I recommend watching. I'm going to skip it right now. It's called Wes Anderson Centered, but Wes Anderson's a director, and you'll see that he likes to use symmetry a lot in his videos. So for the worksheet, right, coming back to here, so write down the definition of symmetry, write down the definition of asymmetry, and then here the challenge is just to draw 4 capital letters with symmetry. So for example, it's kind of obvious, right? If it's the same thing on both sides, it's symmetrical. So if I start with the letter A, obviously, and I know you know this already, that's obviously symmetrical, right? So that's an example of symmetry, right? So you have to kind of go through the alphabet, and it depends on how you draw the letter too. But the letter B, for example, just to point this out, if it's symmetrical either way, so I've got a text box, I'll just keep using it, right? Oh, there it goes. Okay, so that's actually symmetrical because I can draw a line through the axis is going this way, not this way, but that's the same thing on both sides. So you get the idea, right? Same thing with this part down here. Once you have the definition of asymmetry, find 4 capital letters that have an asymmetrical balance. Pretty simple. And then I'm going to get into how to achieve balance using positive, negative space touching all 4 sides. So what exactly am I talking about? So I'll get into that in the next part of the video. But now you have the definition for symmetry, the definition for asymmetry, which I think in your mind's eye you probably already knew.